Hi, everyone. This is International Women's Day that I have turned into International Women's Month. And I'm talking to all of these wonderful women that inspire me and who I like. I only pick people I want to talk to because I get to pick. And one of the people I've chosen to talk to today is Megan. By the way, the International Women's Day theme this year is Inspire Inclusion, and that's what we're doing. We're having conversations that I think are inspiring on all kinds of different fronts. And so today I want to talk to my friend Megan, and I would love to throw over to you, Megan, and have you tell us who you are. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Leah. So my name's Megan, and my pronouns are she, her, and I currently live outside of Seattle, in a little kind of foresty, farmy area, kind of outside Issaquah. But I came here kind of by way of traveling through the Western United States from Colorado, then to California, all the way up the coast. So found the Pacific Northwest to be my home, and have been here for a while. We know each other. I am a yoga teacher of many, many years, also offering sound baths and other things like that. But I also currently am the operations coordinator for Perinatal Support Washington.
Amazing. Awesome. And a mom of a couple super cute kids.
I've got a almost 7-year-old and a 3.5-year-old. So it is pretty much ongoing chaos in my house all the time.
Perfect. Yeah,
Yes.
as you mentioned, like I have been to some of your yoga classes. The first time I ever ran across you was at a sound bath, like at on or around New Year's Day, and I was like, I've never done this before, so I went, and then I became a bit of a sound bath junkie, which is
That's what happens. It's a gateway drug.
exactly. So I did that, and then my friend Nicole and I joined your Women's Moon Circle back in the day, and we did, so we had a chance to get to know each other a little better, and so we've stayed in touch. And so when I was thinking of inspiring people, I thought of Megan and what she does. So, um, I when I think a lot about, what I knew about you when we first met, when you were really spending most of your time in yoga and sound baths and all of that, you had a real heart for pregnant women and pregnancy yoga. But I would love for you to just share whatever you want to share about your journey. And if there's anything about that sort of shows up in what you're doing now in kind of the prenatal support world, love to hear it. So you can share however you want.
Awesome. So the interesting thing for me, and I don't think many yoga teachers often that this is their avenue to yoga, but I took my first yoga class in probably like 2000, 2001. And after class, I had been struggling with a couple things, and I asked the teacher, like, oh, what can I do to like, make this more accessible, make this easier? And the teacher kind of looked at me, and she was probably like in her early 20s, like me, and, basically said, I don't think you're ever going to be able to do that.
Ooh.
And that was something for me that just kind of like, I'm very stubborn. So that's, I sat with that and I really thought about like, I must not be the only person having this experience. Like, I am not the only tight body person going to yoga, trying to like find ways to make it work. And so that's kind of what drove me to be a teacher was like, I want to support people who come to yoga and they can't do everything, that their body needs support, it needs adjustment. And I think that's something that's kind of guided the different steps that I took within yoga over time, where, looking at sound baths, for example, there's people who they want that like healing and that community of coming together, of having that shared space, but maybe they don't want to do yoga or their bodies like that's not what they need in the moment. And sound baths were such a nice way for people to get access into that space where it's like all you have to do is show up and lie down or even just sit down,
Right.
to experience the benefits of it. And so that avenue of accessibility kind of kept showing up for me. As I looked at prenatal yoga, and this was many years before I ever got pregnant myself, but just kind of thinking about like, here's a group of people who like need yoga probably the most, and it's often not that available to them. Or you, as a pregnant person, when I would come into classes, if they didn't know I was a teacher, it would basically be like, well, you can't do this, and you can't do this, and you can't do this, and you can't do this. And it's like,
Yeah.
that's not opening up the space.
Thanks.
And yeah, it's like, well, what can I do?
Right.
Um, so that was like another avenue of just kind of looking at, what does creating access for people look like in very, very simple ways. But one of the things that I started thinking about over time as I started doing more and more of these things, particularly in the prenatal world was I would get so many people. We would do these group check-ins at the beginning of class, and it would give people a chance to kind of say, like, here's what's going on in my body, or, here's like a problem I'm having, like, can yoga do anything for that? But oftentimes, especially postpartum, I would be hearing from folks, I'm overwhelmed, I'm stressed, I'm not doing it right. I don't know like where to go or who to turn to. Nobody set me up for this, in a way that, we get really prepared for birth in this country and then we're like, here you go, good luck.
Right. Right.
For the next, 18 to however many years.
Look.
And yeah, so, there was just this sense of like deep overwhelm. And this was in a space where I started to really like recognize and unpack as a yoga teacher, like who's coming into my classes. My classes, yoga is not accessible in general unless you're at a certain income, often, particularly in the Seattle area, if you're white. And so I was seeing this in groups that were already resourced. Like I was seeing this need. And so I could only imagine what that need was in groups that didn't have resources, who didn't have, some of that like monetary support or, were experiencing inequalities in the healthcare system. And so I had, for many years, Perinatal Support Washington was a place that I had just kind of referred folks to because they have a 24-hour warm line. So, it's the middle of the night, which is often when you're in crisis as a parent.
Yes.
And, you can call and somebody's going to answer the phone and they're going to help you find resources, help you find support. And so that was a space that I often sent folks. And so it was a place that as I kind of started thinking about like, okay, this is a passion that I am feeling strongly about. And that's kind of been my guide. That's what got me into yoga in the first
Yeah.
place. Is like, this is what I'm passionate about. I like helping people. It helped me. And continuing that journey of passion um, into Perinatal Support Washington and the work that they do, because as I got to know more and more about them, so much of the work that they do is around providing culturally matched care. So we have like groups that work with Indigenous folks, groups that work with Latinx folks, groups that work with Black families. We're starting hopefully this year specifically for queer families. So finding like resources and support that are specifically matched to your needs because they can be so different across different cultures, across different life experiences. And so that was something that just kind of drew me into this world. And, on the other side of my kind of Piscean yoga world was this very Capricorn, like organization, operation. And so when I saw they had an operations job available, I was like, okay, this is it. Like,
Yeah. Somebody
this
wrote me a
is
job description, right?
where I need to be. And, when I got this job, it was right around the fall of Roe v. Wade. And so thinking about like, yes, like technically that's about abortion, but that is very much impacting
Totally.
what birth experiences are in our country and how people are supported and resourced, and the people who are having children who maybe now don't want to be having children but are being forced to.
Right.
And so it just felt like this kind of perfect intersection in the timeline of where I was at personally, where our country was at, and what I was hearing from so many of my students around their needs. And so that's kind of where I've landed now. I still do some sound baths from time to time and a little bit of prenatal stuff from here and there, but
Yeah.
that's where I'm spending most of my time right now when I'm not trying to calm the chaos of
Of your
6 year
home.
old and 3 year old.
Yeah, you know what? I love that because and I don't talk about it a lot because I've obviously been in tech for 20 something years, but early in my career I was also a doula, a birth doula.
Oh, awesome.
And I was just talking to someone today about how little, I was actually a young mom, and we were talking about how little we really, like you said, we prep for birth. And
Oh, yeah.
sometimes we don't even prep for the whole birth. We prep for handing you a baby.
Yeah.
Right. And then I remember being in one of my first labors and realizing that I and no one else had told this woman that she was going to have contractions to deliver a placenta and that she was likely she might need stitching. And she was like the panic, right? She was like, I thought we were done.
Mhm.
I'm like, Oh no.
Oh, sorry.
Right. And so as a doula, I was like, okay, one of my like right before birth was like, okay, we're gonna have a hard conversation about what's about to happen. Right. And I would,
Yeah.
and I think what you're saying, and that again, was often white women of a certain means with a certain privilege who could hire a doula privately, right? And you realize there's just such a a disjointedness in what's offered and what's accessible, right? And
Yes.
I think, so I think that's amazing that all came together for you in these different ways. And even, I mean, I'll also say like as a yoga practitioner, walking into a class where as a heavy woman and being like, that teacher doesn't want me here, right? Like you could almost
Mm-hmm.
see it like that lady just realized I can't do some things, but my body can do a lot of things. So
Yeah.
let me give it a shot, right?
Right.
So you don't even know what it can do, right? And so it was, I think there is so much that we like boundaries and barriers we put in place that need to be sort of knocked down, and we have to knock them down together, right? And we have to figure out which ones are we going to push over and which ones are we going to sort of nudge over, right? And I think that's huge.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So when we talk about like really access, and you mentioned this, what do you think are some of the ways that we need to really be thinking about ensuring that access to well-being care and healthcare and really maybe in the prenatal space specifically, or the pregnancy space specifically, what are some things we need to be looking at and thinking about more, to make sure that others have access?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's, I mean, it's
So
such a
many
big,
things.
if we're talking about like healthcare, like that alone is probably like a 2 hour discussion.
Right.
But, I think that one of the things that we can really benefit from, I think, as a whole, and I think this is in, in very general terms, like if we're thinking about like the patriarchal structure and kind of how things are designed and set up within our society, so many of them are kind of set up, especially in like kind of the medical world, they're set up through that lens of the patriarchy. And also just, I mean, if we think about like, testing and, information about health and all of that, like that has happened around generally white men's bodies
Right.
for all of medical time, like, in the modern sense. And so I think what we can really benefit from, not just, in like the medical world, but I think as a whole, is going back to so many of these like matrilineal practices of, like doulas, birth centers, like support that is much broader and holistic and isn't the, okay, here's your doctor, here's your checklist of appointments that you're going to come in for. You'll be seen for 15 minutes each time. Here's what we're going to tell you. There's no room for you to ask questions. Good luck.
Right.
Um, and really creating that space for stories.
Yeah.
Everybody's story is different around, and this is not just about pregnancy and birth. This is just about like personhood. We all have different stories and different things that have brought us to where we are in our life at this point. And there's so many things that have fed into that, just in our own, like, families. But then if we look at the broader structures of inequality and racism and ableism and, misogyny and, homophobia and all these things that shape who we are and then our experience of landing wherever we've landed. And in particular, like if we're talking about birth, like there's so many like small divergences along that path that can vastly affect your outcome,
Yeah.
that have to do with, you know, where you're birthing or who you're birthing with, but then also the stories that you're bringing to the table about like what you're capable of, what you can ask for, what your value is. And I think that if we can start to shift um, out of some of these structures of what we think, you know, healthcare, medicine, support looks like, and if we're actually stopping to, I think one of the things that I'm seeing, at least in the perinatal world right now, is there's a lot of research going behind outcomes where people have different kinds of support. So looking at what does it look like for people to have mental health support, like from the start of their pregnancy all the way through like the first couple of years, then what are the outcomes for those parents and also those kids?
Yeah.
Looking at the support of, having people of color birthing in communities of color. You have, a doula of color, you have a midwife of color, you have a support of a community around you, and how that supports and kind of fosters growth, but also healing around whatever stories you're bringing to the table. And so I think a lot of what we can do right now is kind of step outside of the binary of like, I feel like so much of like patriarchal structures are set up in a binary. And so stepping out of that binary and looking at like the spectrum of what support looks like, and how that can really create spaces that are safer and healthier for people. Because that's actually being shown, like, then we bring in back like science, and we bring in,
Yeah.
measurement, and we go, oh no, this
That's what
scientifically is
works.
actually proving that it works, not
Yeah.
just like us saying so. And so, if us on the outside, like not all of us have to run out and, get a job with an organization like this, but like if you're thinking about like, if I want to provide support like monetarily or with my time, like finding organizations like within your community, like, in the broader, kind of Seattle community, there was a birth center that just opened up in Federal Way, I think at the end of 2023. And it's owned and run by a Black midwife, like it has Black doulas, it's the first of its kind in this area. And so it's like, if you want to support, like donate money, if you want to support, like volunteer with the warm line, like take phone calls with the warm line and help support folks. There's so many different ways that we can support. And it's not, I think sometimes, at least for me, I get caught up in looking at the bigger picture of like, there's this huge structure in place, and like, how do we break it?
Are we
Like, that
gonna
seems
are we gonna fix it
impossible.
all, right?
Yeah. Or like, how do we like build up something new? But it's like, I think for me, I realized like I just have to take little small bites, and
Yeah.
like one tiny little bite of just like, here's a small donation, here's a donation of my time, here's me shifting, kind of where I want to put my resources and my support. And I think that, you know, if enough of us are doing it, it can make huge changes. I think that's what we've seen with so many of, you know, the women's movements as of late. Like, you get a few voices, and then eventually there's an avalanche. And if you keep that avalanche going, change can happen. But if we get stuck in the overwhelm of, I don't know how to fix this, or I don't know how to make it better, that can be paralyzing.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
And so, it's just like the tiny step. Like it doesn't have to be big,
Yeah,
it's just
no, that
taking
makes
those
total
little
sense.
tiny steps.
Yeah, I love that. And I think even just normalizing for me, one of the things I've really thought about a lot is just normalizing the conversations we have as women. I remember when I was doulaing that sometimes I would say, like, people will tell you their horror stories. It's okay for you to say, I'm not interested in that right now.
Yes.
Right? I can't hear, I thank you, but I can't hear your terror story. So unless you're about to tell me something great, please don't. Right. and and saying,
Absolutely.
and even get saying like, I give them permission to tell you something that you need to know, but
Yeah.
not the horror story. Like what
Yeah.
tips would you give me? What should I know that you didn't know? Right. But not the like, I pushed for 7,000 hours, right? Like, no, that's not helpful.
Yeah.
Right? That's
Not
not, don't
helpful.
help. Right? Don't tell me that. That's not, I wrote a birth plan and it went to shit. Like, no, okay, not helpful. Of course they can go to
Yeah.
shit, right? And
That's
it's
most people's birth plan stories, I feel like.
no, it's like that's why I mean when as a doula, people are like, can we write a birth plan? Yeah, we can. Like if that's what you want to do, right? We can do that, but just be flexible, right? But I
Yeah.
also think there's an element of this, like even as a coach, I'm coaching people, it's really fascinating. Sometimes I'll be talking to a female client and they will start telling me something and I'll have this like, I need to ask if they're perimenopausal. I need to ask, like I want to poke at it a bit, but I also don't want to, I want to be really, really tender with it. So I will sometimes ask permission. Can I ask you a personal question about, being a woman?
Yeah.
And often women are like, yes, like they're always, and then if I say like, could you be perimenopausal? Or, how long has it been since you had that miscarriage? Because your hormones, like you think it's over, but it's only been 3 months.
Yeah.
Right. Or you know what? It takes six to 12 months, sometimes 18 months for your body to get back to normal after a birth. Like, where are you in that? And it's interesting to me. I watch women sort of light up and say, "Oh, I didn't know that." Right?
Yeah.
And I'm not an expert. I just know enough to be like, you should talk to your doctor. You should talk to your
Yeah.
mom. You should call someone, right? Like I can tell you what I know from the science and ask you a question that should send you on a bit of a path. But that may be showing up in what you've come to me about career change, but you
Yeah.
feel lost. And I'm like, yeah, that you feel you're the person will be telling me like, I feel crazy. I can't, I'm overwhelmed. I'm this. And I'm like, I don't think that's about your job. Something else,
Mhm.
there's more happening here. It could be about the job, but there, and I just think I want us to normalize having conversations that are real, right?
Absolutely.
Like,
Yeah, it's that through line, I think, of stories, of sharing stories. And I think that so many stories, particularly around the female body, are considered taboo. Um, and I think that was probably a little bit of the like the seeds of the women's moon groups that I started, was like recognizing that if we come together and we're telling our stories, there you're finding similarity and you're finding camaraderie in people very different from you, of just kind of like, oh, and I think that that is truly often uh where we can find our power, is finding like, oh, other people are experiencing the same thing that I am. Yes, it might look a little different, or their journey might be a little bit different, but that continuity, I mean, I would see it over and over again in my circles in pre and postnatal yoga of, I would bring something up that, like, I'd be like, oh, like something that people maybe wouldn't talk about.
yeah,
Um, oh, one of the things that there's a lot of vaginal nerve pain when you're pregnant, and people don't talk about it.
no,
And I would just be like, I had a client who would call it vagina crotch, or lightning crotch. And I was like, yes, it is, or she would call it vagina lightning. And I was like, does anybody have this? And you, like you said, like
right.
there's a lightning that happens of like people going like, I'm not the only one. Like I
But
didn't want
what
to
is
mention it
my
because
weird
I,
vagina, right?
yeah. And so there's that like lightness that happens when we start to share stories. And I think looking ahead, in my like timeline in my female body, are those like perimenopause and menopause stories that I've started hearing from friends. And it's like continuing to share those stories and normalizing this, and not having it be, whether we're talking about miscarriage or abortion or birth or pregnancy or postpartum or perimenopause or menopause, like all of it gets kind of like, oh, you shouldn't talk about that. And there's so much power when we do,
Uh,
um, to just like find those through lines of our stories, that I think is so beautiful.
yeah, yeah. I'm studying right now to get a coaching certification around perimenopause and menopause, like coaching women who are going through that. And
Awesome.
my best friend, who's a nurse practitioner, is and a women's health practitioner, is like, she just laughs because I do a chapter and then I'm mad, right? I'm like, why is this a thing?
Yeah.
And she's like, welcome to women's health, right? Like, I'm
Yes.
sorry that you're struggling, but keep going, keep going. We
Yeah.
need to keep going. And I'm like, so infuriating that we don't know what these muscles do. We think it does this. I'm sorry, why do we not know? Right? And
Yes.
I'm just like, so, and I think like how much of that gets lost because like what you said, we just don't talk about it. And it's this like
Mhm.
taboo topic. And I'm like, okay, it's bad enough men can't handle a conversation about periods. It's a whole nother world if we can't talk about it.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, and like you said, there can be cultural issues and trauma issues and all these different places that intersect that make us go, I can't talk about that. But man, I want
Yeah.
us to talk about it. I just want us to be able to say, hey, can I tell you this thing that's happening? And you can tell me if you've had this experience or know someone who has.
Totally.
So, okay. Thank you so much for all of that. I would love to ask you one more
Yeah.
question. If you were going to give young Megan some advice, thinking back to when you were younger, and you were going to give her some advice that you think might be beneficial to the women and girls who are listening today, or even the men who are listening in, what would that advice be?
Uh, it's funny because I think that I have a daughter. My daughter is 6, and I feel like raising my daughter, I get to kind of in a way like re-raise myself. I
Yeah.
get to like answer those questions of like, oh, what do I wish I had heard? Or, what do I wish I'd been told or not told? And I think one of the things, at least right now, that really comes up for me is you don't need to make yourself small. There's
Yes.
no reason.
Oh,
There is no reason. There is nobody that you need to please. There is nothing that you just need to be yourself. And I think that um, seeing that in my daughter, just like it brings me like as a parent, it's sometimes very frustrating. Like, my wife and I laugh sometimes. We're like, raising a strong, independent girl is really challenging, but like, think about the adult that she's going to be. Like, think about the person that she will be with these tools. And as a parent now, like having someone who questions you or like pushes the boundaries of like what's okay, like like in terms of politeness or whatever, and really stepping back and going like, okay, what if I just let her be herself?
yeah.
What if I let her not try to play small and just experience life as she is? And I don't always, like, I am not a perfect parent. Like, there are times where I'm just like, you need to be quiet. We are in a restaurant or,
Yay.
whatever. But, like other times where I'm just like, like, you want to do this wild thing? Okay, let's do it. Like, let's see what that looks like. Let's experience that. And so I think for myself, for her, for those like anybody listening, like you don't need to make yourself small to please other people ever.
Yeah. Take up the space
And
that is yours to take up. Whatever
totally,
shape it is in the moment you're in, right? 100%. I
yes.
love that. And you know what? The world doesn't need any more nice girls.
No, we got enough of
We got
them.
plenty of nice girls. I mean, kind girls, I'll take kind girls all day long,
Yes,
right? Kindness, I'm for, but kindness can go right alongside with ambition and aggression and running and doing the thing and getting it done, or self,
totally.
whatever you are. But we don't need more nice girls. Like, awesome, right? So I'm over it.
Yes.
So,
Yes. Well,
I always say,
I'm hopefully raising one of those.
yeah, I mean, I say all the time, like people, if I've been called every aggressive, bossy, abrasive. I've been called all of those things because I'm a direct communicator, and I've always said I'm fine with all of your words unless you can tell me I wasn't kind. When
Yeah.
you can tell me I wasn't kind, I will apologize. But if I was kind and bossy, if I was kind and aggressive, that's on you, not me.
Yeah.
Right?
Totally.
And that's for me, it's very similar. Like I'm taking up the space that's mine. Right.
Yes.
And you want your daughter to do that. I want that for you. I want that for me. I want that for the people listening. And I think that's a great piece of advice. I love it. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh
And
my
this
gosh.
was
Thank
so
you.
fun. This is a great conversation. We said
So
vagina
good to
more
see
than
you.
I've said in a while. So this is fun.
Welcome to my world.
Yes. I'm like, I'm gonna have a little note. P.S. Fellas, we're gonna say vagina a lot, so you'll be all right. Um, for those of you who are watching, if you'd like to donate to the Malala Fund, it is a charity that helps make sure that women and girls are educated, often in areas where education is not available to them, but it also helps for women and girls who want to study STEM, medicine, other opportunities where they can really just dig in and get that education that they want to have the opportunities that they want. So if you'd like to donate, there's a QR code in the corner and you can do that. And at the end of this 30 days, I will make sure that that money gets to the fund. Megan, thank you so much for joining me. And
Thank you.
I will see everyone in the next video.